Okay. Internal gross anatomy of the kidney, looking at a coronal section of the kidney, starting with the basics. First off, the outer portion is usually lighter, and that would just be just below the fibrous capsule or renal capsule that we talked about when we were talking about the layers just a few minutes ago. Just inside that capsule, you'll run into the renal cortex, which is the generally lighter outer portion. Cortex generally is going to be lighter if you have a cortex and a medulla. Oh, I'm sorry, more superficial if you have cortex and a medulla. The inner portion usually is darker, and it's called the medulla, and it's composed of a couple of things. First off, these guys right here between the pyramids are called the renal columns. And then you have these triangle-shaped structures that are called renal pyramids. The base of the pyramid faces outward toward the cortex. The tip of the pyramid is more medial, and it faces the medial surface of the kidney. The tip of each pyramid is called the renal papilla. Papilla, again, means nipple. Here's your renal papilla right there at the base. And it is surrounded by a little cup. And the little cup is called the minor calyx. Each renal pyramid has a papilla that's surrounded by a minor calyx. And then the minor calyces will gather more than one minor calyx to become a major calyx. And then all of the major calyces will gather to form this big structure, which is called the renal pelvis right here. And the renal pelvis is what dumps into the ureter when the urine is on its way out. Okay, so we'll get into this in more detail in just a minute. But basically what is going to happen is urine is really going to be made from the outside here to the inside. So it's going to be made from out here, and then it's going to dump into the papilla, which will get gathered into a minor calyx, and then into a major calyx, and then into the renal pelvis, and then into the ureter, then into the urinary bladder, and then the urethra, and then it's going to go outside the body. That's just the gross anatomy of how urine actually flows. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is I want to talk about blood flow to the kidney, and then a little bit about innervation of the kidney. So blood flow to and from the kidney is kind of one of the more complicated things. It's not as bad after you've gone through it a couple times. Okay, so big picture understanding, the blood flow through the kidney is going to, of course, come ultimately from the descending abdominal aorta, right? So you guys know that, but let's just go ahead and write it there. So blood flow to the kidney comes from the descending abdominal aorta, which means it's still going to be pretty high pressure. And then from there, it's going to branch to the renal artery, and that's not going to surprise anybody. Renal artery right here, right? Okay, and then what is it going to do? Well, remember what we are going to have to do is ultimately we're going to have to get that blood to capillary beds, because that's where you're going to do exchange. And in the kidneys, not only am I going to do gas exchange, drop off oxygen for the kidneys to use and pick up carbon dioxide so that I can take it back to the lungs, but in addition, the kidney is going to have to get rid of a bunch of waste products and some water. So there's going to be kind of a complicated capillary system at the kidney. So let's first go through the anatomy of the capillaries and blood supply to the kidney, and then we'll go through a little bit about the functionality of it. So first, the kidneys are going to have this gross anatomy of the blood flow that you see, renal artery, and ultimately it's going to come back out the renal vein. But because of the functionality of the kidney, not only is it going to be low oxygen blood that comes out the renal vein, it's also going to be lower fluid content because, of course, you lose fluid at your kidneys. And it's going to be different. It's going to have lost some waste products that you need to get rid of at your kidney, like urea and uric acid, and these what you call nitrogenous waste products. So we're going to go through this once with just the blood flow, and then later on we'll talk a little bit more about functionality, because what I want you to understand is you're going to be able to sort of see the gross anatomy of the blood flow of the kidney until you get out here to the cortex. And then in order to figure out what it's going to do, you're going to have to sort of blow up what you're seeing at the cortex. And then this is called the microcirculation of the kidney. The big picture understanding of the microcirculation of the kidney is at the kidney, there are these locations where you have microscopic blood tubes, capillaries, right next to microscopic P tubes, which are called renal tubules or kidney tubules. And whenever you have these two that are really in close proximity to one another, you can take stuff from the blood and put it into the kidney tubules. And you can take stuff back from the kidney tubules and bring it back into the blood. So at this microcirculation of the kidney, you have all of these opportunities for exchange, which is really what the kidney is going to do. So what's going to end up happening is you're going to push a whole bunch of waste products into what we call the P tubes that ultimately you're going to end up peeing out, right? And then you're going to try to keep all of the best stuff, if you can, in the blood, and then you're going to deliver that back into circulation. So that will make more sense to you after we go through the whole structure of the nephron. But for right now, I want to follow the blood supply through the kidney. So first thing is, get a color that you will be able to see pretty well. Okay, so blood is going to come in through the renal artery, which is right here, okay? And then it's going to branch as it goes through the renal pelvis into the segmental artery, which is right here, okay? And then we're going to follow the segmental artery, any one we want to, up. And as you follow it up, it's going to go along the side of a pyramid as an interlobar artery. Because if you think of these as like lobes of the kidney, then these are going between the lobes, interlobar. And then it's going to arch around the base as the arcuate artery, okay? And then it's going to give rise to these little bicycle spoke guys, arteries, all of these right here. Those are called the interlobular arteries. A lobule is smaller than a lobe, so now we are up at the interlobular arteries. Okay, from the interlobular arteries, you're going to lead to what we call the microcirculation of the kidney. So again, what we need to do is we need to blow one of these up and look at it over here and orient yourself, because this is the arcuate artery that I saw over here. This is the interlobular artery that I saw over there, and then it's going to give rise to the microcirculation of the kidney. So this isn't going to be the last time you look at this, just it's going to be the first time. So from there we are going to give rise to this guy right here. Notice we still haven't actually gotten to a capillary bed, but we're about to. This vessel that we just got off of the interlobular artery is called the afferent arteriole. Okay, and it is going to lead to our first capillary bed. That capillary bed right there is called the glomerulus. So we just did afferent arteriole and glomerulus. The glomerulus is really, really high pressure, and there's going to be a lot of filtration that goes on as you go through the glomerulus. Out of the glomerulus, we are going to lead here, that guy right there. Going back out of the glomerulus is called the efferent arteriole, and the efferent arteriole is going to lead to one of two capillary beds. Now, in this figure, they're actually showing both of them, peritubular capillaries and vasorecta. Generally speaking, you're only going to lead to one of them, so this is kind of a hybrid picture. If the capillaries that come from the efferent arteriole stay up in the cortex and wrap mostly around the P tubes up in the cortex, then they are called the peritubular capillaries, as in around the tube. But if they dip down into the medulla and mostly wrap around this long straight P tube called the nephron loop, then it's called the vasorecta, and vasorecta means straight vessel. Okay, so notice that you have these as two possibilities right here. It's going to do one or the other, and I'll show you both in just a minute. Okay, so either way, at either of those locations, what they are going to do is do gas and waste exchange. Hopefully what will happen is the waste products are going to end up in the pee, and all of the good stuff that you wanted to keep is going to stay in the bloodstream. And then I'm going to be done. I'm going to be done doing the capillary exchange, and I'm going to be ready to dump it back into a vein. And I'm going to go back into this vein right here, which is called the interlobular vein. Actually, let me change the color because now we are going to be in veins. Let's change it to, we'll just do a green color. So now I'm going to be back in the interlobular vein. But you can see interlobular veins here too, right? That's an interlobular vein. And then it is going to go arcuate vein, right? Then interlobar vein. And then I do not know why, I can't tell you. These should be called the segmental veins, but they're not. They just consider them an extension of the interlobular veins until you get to this guy, which is of course the renal vein, and that's going to dump back into the inferior vena cava. So the renal veins return blood to the IVC. IVC, inferior vena cava. Okay, we will see in just a minute that the blood pressure in the glomerulus is going to be much, much higher than it is in other capillaries, and that is in part just because of this weird little thing. So keep this in mind. Look at this. Afferent arteriole going in, then glomerulus, then efferent arteriole going out. Well, this will actually bump up in pressure because of one simple thing. The afferent arteriole going in is much wider in diameter than the efferent arteriole going out. So basically, we've got a big tube leading in and a small tube coming out, which bumps up the pressure in the glomerulus. And you have about 1 million glomeruli per kidney, so it ends up being a pretty dramatic impact on the pressure and blood flow. So the challenge that I give you here is to trace the flow of blood from the abdominal aorta into and out of the kidney back into the inferior vena cava. And after you have done that a few times, you will start to see this microcirculation. But the microcirculation, by the way, starts at the interlobular artery, and then you can go back to being able to see the circulation at the interlobular vein. Okay, a little bit about innervation of the kidney. The kidney does have nerves going to and from it. I don't think they've got any of them shown in this picture. There is a network of nerves called the renal plexus. It's not the same as like the brachial plexus, and it's not as big. That are sensory and motor nerves, and they enter at the hilum, so they go in this side right here. And the motor function, basically you have sympathetic innervation that's coming from the thoracic region of the spinal cord. And primarily what it's doing is controlling the diameter of the arterioles leading to the kidney. And it may also have a function in stimulating hormone release, but we're not really sure. And then the motor function of parasympathetic innervation goes to the kidney, but we're really not sure what the parasympathetic innervation from the vagus nerve going through the kidney actually does. So we do know it has parasympathetic innervation. Now, the sensory innervation to your kidneys is that your kidneys can actually hurt. Like if you've got a kidney infection or somebody punches you in the kidney, they definitely can feel pain. Okay, so we'll stop there and then we'll do some more microscopic anatomy and functionality of the kidney.